This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and different guests pretty much every week. This week, I'm joined by Ed Morrison, and he's got the most amazing story, which I'm longing for you all to hear. He runs an organisation called Roots Allotments, but I'm not going to say any more before I welcome him and let him tell his story. So hello, Ed. How are you doing?
Hey, Sarah. I'm doing really, really good. Thank you very much.
It's a nice day.
Oh, I was going to say, I've been out in the sunshine. I finally brought myself to cut my lawn. It's been since early spring, and I've just given it a little cut. And I kind of felt a bit guilty because we did no mow May, and then it turned into no mow June, and then it turned into no mow July. And my girlfriend was like, I need to start practicing some yoga in the garden, but the grass is 4 foot high. So please, can you cut it? And I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah, I can see her point. I think it's a fair time to cut it now. So Ed, tell us all about kind of where you came from and then talk us through the history of Roots.
Yeah, sure. So my growing journey started at the beginning of lockdown. Like so many people sort of had this bit of an awakening that they wanted to get their hands in the earth. But before I actually sowed a seed, I'd spent 7 years working in advertising agencies in London, in the heart of the city. I was brought up in East Devon, and I just sort of had this moment where I was like, what am I doing with my life? I'm going to climate protests at the weekend and coming into work on fast fashion during the week, and then being asked to pitch on airways, oil companies, and things that really didn't align with who I was. So I sort of was dealing with this massive amount of cognitive dissonance working in London in this urban environment, in a really corporate environment. And I just had this moment where I was like, do you know what? I don't really care about this career that I've launched. And I'm going to move back home. I'm going to live with my grandma. And that was the only plan I had. And lucky for me, I was in the really privileged position that my grandma welcomed me back with open arms. Like I grew up with her. And just that she was just like, look, you need some R&R, come back and we'll give you the support that you need. So I managed to get over a huge amount of burnout. And I started sort of thinking about food, growing food. We tried it when I was younger and we had zero success, but I came across this statistic by the Soil Association that said that a quarter of supermarket produce could contain up to 14 different pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, herbicides and fungicides, but the UK government only tests for one being above the legal limit. So it made me really start thinking about the food that I was consuming and where I was getting it from. And like, I'm a vegetarian. So when you switch to the veggie side, you go, oh, I'm eating vegetables. So that's almost guaranteed to be healthy.
Yes.
But once you start unpeeling the onions of the industrial agricultural sort of mindset, you're like, oh my gosh, this gets pretty deep. So I had that realization, and then I spotted that there was a growing talk going on in my local village called Lyme Regis. And someone called Charles Dowding was going to come here and talk about no dig. And I just thought, oh yeah, I'm going to go along to that, see what it's about. I'd never even heard of no dig. I didn't even know what double digging was then. And I think Charles spoke for like an hour and a half, and I spent an hour and a half on my phone writing notes because something just like exploded in my brain where I was like, oh my gosh, I have to give this a go. This sounds like the most accessible way to get into growing. And I jokingly went up to him afterwards and bought one of his calendars and got him to sign it. And I said to him, I'm going to set up an acre market garden this summer. This is what's going to happen. And he just said, have you ever sown a seed before? I said, no. He said, well, good luck with that. And so we sort of left it at that. And I didn't speak to Charles till at least a year later, but we'll sort of get onto that. So I sort of went back home. I started looking into no dig. I bought one of Charles's books. I started reading it, and that put me on like a 4 to 5 month journey of trying to understand like how you grow, what a spacing is, what a depth is, what time of year you sow certain seeds. I found it really, really overwhelming and complicated because I went to the growing talk in winter, so I couldn't really get going at how I wanted to. So I had to understand the limitations of the season straight away. But then as that sort of year sort of span out and we started to get the murmurings of COVID over Christmas, then after Christmas, then moving into like sort of April, where everyone was like, this is something pretty serious that's happening to society. That's when I sort of really started to get the itch to get going and grow my own food.
So in terms of the timeline, so in fact, you went to your grandma's before COVID.
Yeah. Okay. 8 months before COVID, at least. I just quit my job. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to support myself, and just thought I just need to be home. So I was interested in getting into growing before lockdown, but lockdown was that catalyst for me. And I went to the supermarket one day to get some food for my nan and my family. There were queues out the door, and I was just like, what is going on here? Then you like look around, there's people fighting over toilet paper. And I just sort of had this moment where I thought, if people are fighting over toilet paper, that's disappeared now. What are they going to do if the food runs out? If our globalized food chains potentially collapse, then where are we going to get our food from? I went back home. I said to my nan, I was like, Nan, what would you do if you went to the supermarket tomorrow and you couldn't get your food? And she was like, I have no idea. So I said, Nan, why don't we just grow some food in the garden? And she said to me, no. And I was just like, okay, right. So you're not receptive to this idea. I said, why, Nan? Why are you saying no? She said, we tried it years ago. We did that double digging thing. It didn't work. There were lots of weeds. We didn't have much high yields of produce. It was just too much effort and energy. And I just said to her, I said, look, I totally understand you've had that experience. And I also realized that what I'm going to say is coming from a place of inexperience. I've not sown a seed before. I've got no idea what I'm doing, but I've met this person called Charles Dowding, and he's convinced me that this way, which is called no dig, which supposedly, and now I know it definitely does, it does lead to less weeds, it leads to less watering, less backbreaking work, and you get higher yields over time, which is getting proven now with research. So I had this like hour and a half, 2 hour back and forth with my nan. She's from up north, so she needs to be persuaded properly. And then we finally agreed on 60 square meters of her little garden. And like,
wow, that's not that little.
I know she's got half an acre, so she loves the ornamental, she loves the flowers, she loves the roses, and she wasn't into the idea of growing food. So yeah, I convinced. I sort of, my granddad, bless him, he's got really late stage sort of dementia and Alzheimer's, but he was the one who sort of said, look, just let him have a bit of ground to grow on. And we finally moved past the big family debate, because the house that I grew up in is multi-generational. I grew up with my aunties, my uncles, my cousins, my mum, and my grandparents. So
nice.
There's a lot of people in one house, and we had to have that big round table discussion about the ins and outs of me being allowed to grow. And I've got quite frustrated, because I'm just like, please just let me grow food. Like, I don't feel like this is a big ask, but as we get deeper into the story, it does seem like there are a lot of struggles with people trying to get into agriculture in the UK, and it's very hard to get access to it. So yeah, I started sowing my seeds. I had plug plants coming out of my ears. I had no idea what I was doing. We made the first beds out of mushroom compost, cardboard, classic combination. Yeah. Straight on top of the lawn that was there. And like, I had this moment where I was like, what do I do with all these plants? And then I just started putting them in the ground. Maybe I didn't get the spacings that right, but like literally weeks passed, months passed, and the garden was full of abundance. And I was just like, I've never done this before. How come I've managed to get this right and grow the food in a way that is productive, that we're now supplying meals to our family table with. And it's literally been, oh, I started this at the beginning of April, and now we're cropping after that, like a month and a half after. And it just, I don't know, something really sparked in my head. I had this transformation over that lockdown period where, despite the world feeling like it was sort of collapsing in on itself and everyone was getting locked away, I found this freedom in the soil, and I found this tranquility and the solace in this thing that has been missing from my life. And before I started growing, the effects of working in London for 7 years in advertising, I was really, really down in the dumps. I was depressed. I was like, my mental health was just, so bad that I didn't know what was going to rescue me. And discovering growing, it just totally flipped my whole mindset. And I just thought, oh, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. Yeah. And after lockdown finished, unfortunately, a lot of the ways to make a living and to survive in Devon, they're very tourist hospitality industry based. And I sort of did that from a 14-year-old child all the way up until I left Devon, and I really didn't want to go back into that. So unfortunately, I dragged myself back to London and was trying to do some consultancy work, brand strategy, that sort of thing, using the things that I'd learned in advertising to empower brands that I was more aligned with. And that was the big hope, basically, to sort of find another way and find somewhere to grow. And I was hanging out with my friends Will and Christian, who are my partners on Roots, and we go back 15 plus years now. I met them both when I came to university in Bath. Funnily enough, I met them at a cocktail bar that I was working at, and they were my customers, and I just really got on with them, and we've been friends ever since. And Will's a local farmer's son in Bath, and Christian's quite an entrepreneurial gentleman who loves launching businesses, and he's very good with finances. So something I'm really bad with finances. I'm totally dyscalculus. So yeah, we all bring something different to the table, and we were playing squash like week in, week out, trying to look after ourselves, do some exercise, and sort of connect with each other. And we were just sort of hanging out after squash, having a pint. And I said to the guys, guys, like, like you've seen this transformation in me. And they all agreed that I was a lot happier than I was when I left London. And I said, look, if it can happen in me, it can happen in anyone. And the benefits of growing are amazing. Like, have you guys ever considered growing your own food? Have you ever considered getting an allotment? And they sort of said no. And we agreed as a group of friends that we were going to try and pursue growing. And that was just on a total personal level. We hadn't even thought of the roots then. But then we were all living in Lambeth, which is like South London. And we looked at the allotment waiting list for that borough, and it was like around 28 years. And we were like 27 at the time, and we just thought, that's more than our life. That's more than lived years on this planet so far. So we sort of just thought, how are we going to grow? And then we started looking around the country, and we noticed that this was quite a common problem in a lot of cities. I'm not saying it's 28 years everywhere, but it's 2 to 8 years in a majority of cities and towns. Yeah. The waiting lists are getting longer. The allotment sites are getting sold off for housing. In 1945, we had 1.5 million allotments, and now we have just around 200,000. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a really sad decrease in the amount of access to growing spaces in inner city environments. And the last 40 years of sort of globalization has meant that our green spaces are getting sold off. Yeah. The places that we can grow on are getting pushed further and further out of cities. So yeah, we thought, I said to the guys, I said, look, I did 5 months of research before I sowed my first seed. Like, if there's any way that we can make it easier and simpler. And I showed them the plants that I was planting. I showed them the timeline on Excel that I created to help me understand the season a lot easier. And they just thought, wow, like, if no one's doing something about the waiting list, why don't we try and do something about the waiting lists and see if there's a different way to do it? And like Christian, being the entrepreneur that he is, he just said, well, take all the research that you've done, the plants, the seeds, the tools that you need, the way you set it up, and let's turn it into a full service. So we'll try and do the opposite of a council allotment, where you can come to us, we're open for advice, we've got WhatsApp chats where the community can ask questions together. we'll give you the right seeds at the right time of year. We'll give you the right plug plants at the right time of year. We'll set the beds up for you. We'll try and keep them as weed free as possible before you get to the site. And we'll run 28 workshops a year. Some of them are agricultural focused, so showing beginners how to sow seeds for the first time. Some people are scared of it. Some people are scared of failure.
Yeah.
Social media, the whole idea of the perfection of social media puts people off something that they could potentially fail at. And like, gardening really humbles you because you have to embrace the failure. You have to embrace the pest. You have to embrace the disease, especially if you want to grow without chemicals. So yeah, we thought, let's offer this whole package, which means that someone can turn up, they can come to a root site, and within 45 minutes of being at a root site, you've had a one-on-one welcome slot with a patch manager who's passionate and knowledgeable about what they're doing. They've shown you how to sow a seed. They've shown you what spacing is. They've told you about the general rule of thumbs about how deep to plant seeds. We've talked about multi-sowing. So someone comes on their welcome slot. I go, this is how you multi-sow radish. You'll put 4 seeds in one hole and come back in a month and a half's time. And that is going to be the first thing that you will have grown. And that will complete the cycle of sowing to harvesting to eating. And that's when the magic really connects, when you eat your first harvest. So on the welcome slot, we'd just try and give people a 101 of this is how you can get into growing. This is how you can skip all of the information that's out there and just get going. Because what I've realized is that you can give people as much advice as you like, but until they start learning from their own mistakes, a lot of the time, 80% of the information is going to go in one ear and out the other. But if I get them sowing seeds, putting in plug plants, showing them what an edge looks like, how to edge on their patch, then this is the stuff that it's like the core 101s that they just need to know straight away, and then just go and experiment. Like nature is your playground after that.
So it started in Bath. So that was your first one, your first site, or are you going to move on to telling us about how you found the land?
Yeah, so basically, we are so lucky that Will's family, they are farmers in and around Bath. They farm thousands of acres here. They're tenant farmers for the duchy. They've got a generational tenancy. Will's family have farmed these lands for over 4 generations now. So when we came up with the idea of roots, we were like, how are we going to persuade someone to even let us try this? And Will just went, oh, I'm a family farm, an 8-acre field just outside the city centre. Why don't we try it on that?
Wow.
So, yeah. So we trotted over to Bath. We had a conversation with his family. We convinced them that this was something worthwhile doing. They're very skeptical, as everyone was when we first started out. Everyone said, no, that's never going to work. It doesn't make sense. We thought, why has no one tried it before? Maybe it doesn't work. But I mean, I can kind of understand why no one's really tried this before, because it is very, very hard work. Like, we all work 6-7 days a week, and there are so many layers to it and sort of operational considerations to try and logistically manage a multi-site nationwide growing business is very, very challenging. But we love it. This is what we do every day. So yeah, we've secured the first bit of land, and we thought, oh yeah, Will and Christian were like, we've got 10 grand savings each. We'll put that together and let's see what happens. So we were like, okay, we've got something to launch the business, £20,000. We've found the land. And then I was completely honest with the guys. I was like, look, this is only my second season growing. So I'm not an expert. I'm still not an expert. I think there is so much that you can learn. Growing is like, it's so hard to know everything on it, and it's a continuous journey of learning. But I was very honest with them. I was like, look, cool, I will be the face of it and try and inspire other beginners to get into it and hopefully make them realize that the journey doesn't have to be a hard one. And so I said, I was inspired by Charles Dowding, and I feel like he's someone who's really important to talk to about what we're about to do, because there are no other 100% no-dig allotments in the world. Like, this is a world first. And if he's someone who's been championing this indigenous technique for the last 40 years and trying to bring it to the forefront and show people like there is a different way, we don't have to till the soil and you don't have to use these chemicals, then it's someone that I really want to be involved in what we're doing. And so I sent him a picture of my scrappy calendar that I bought off him for lockdown that I used as my sort of sewing guide. And I sent him a picture of the signature being like, hey, I know you probably won't remember me, but we met in Lyme Regis at this growing talk, and you totally inspired me on my journey. It's changed my life. And now we're thinking of doing this crazy idea of setting up no-dig allotment sites. Do you want to talk to us about it? And like, I messaged him on like the 20th of December, and he was like, yeah, come on over. And I was like, when? And he was like, Boxing Day. Does that sound good? So like, we literally just went over, like me, Will and Christian went over to Charles's on Boxing Day. And we just talked for hours and hours and hours about the journey, no dig, what we were trying to achieve. Charles thought it was a crazy idea, and obviously was skeptical about it as well. But I said, look, I'd love it if you were an advisor on what we're doing. And like I said, I don't feel like it's right for me to try and launch this without you being involved. And he basically said that he wants to help us out. He gave me access to all of his books and information in a digital form, and said, borrow what you want from it to repurpose into courses for your members, basically. So
fantastic.
Yeah. And he's been to a few of our opening parties and just become like a really close friend. And he's such an amazing person. I'm just inspired by him every day. And the way that he teaches people is such a rare way for a sage to teach people in such a sort of a gentle manner, where you don't ever feel like you're being told off by him. He's always really open-minded and sort of accepting that people do have different ways of doing things. And if you want to try out a couple of different ways to see what works best for you, then that's what's going to make growing an accessible thing to you. And just trying to take that, it's so hard for me to take that and repurpose it to teach our members. But that's how I try to teach our members in that way, where if they are doing something that we don't necessarily think is the right way, then we can have an open conversation about whether they want to continue doing it or try something else and do both things at the same time and just experiment and try and not get set in your ways.
Because one of the things I've seen is that you have this nice sign going into any of your sites that says no dig, no chemicals, good vibes.
Yeah.
And so this is really interesting to me and to all of us, I think, is how do you control when something isn't quite right or someone is kicking off or not doing it? I mean, you just do it with discussion, but and then what happens if they, or perhaps you found everybody has ended up agreeing with you?
Well, I mean, I think there's exceptions to the rule, except for the chemicals and the good vibes. I think one thing that we're realizing from recovering quite intensively farmed agricultural land up and down the country, some of our organic matter content is like 1.5% on our fields in our soil. Some of it is 7%. Some of it is super compact. Some of it is really sandy. Sometimes you can jump 2 foot from the field boundary where the original field height was straight onto the soil, and that's where the soil's gone. So
yes,
it's like sometimes the weeds that come up in those areas are so intense that you have to dig them out. And I always just try and be open-minded. Like I was walking around the site the other day, I saw someone using a fork to weed and dig, and they had dug their whole patch, and I sort of went up to them. I said, "Oh, what are you hoping to achieve here?" And they just said, "Look, I've grown on this spot for 1.5 years now. I've suffered severely from thistles, and basically I've picked them, but the only way to get them out is to dig them out and try and remove as much of the root as possible. And once I've done this whole patch, I'm doing cardboard and compost, and I'm never doing it again." And instead of me just going straight in and being like, "Why are you digging?" or "Why are you doing that?" I was inquisitive as to what their sort of what their objective was. And it's a lot easier way to get into that conversation with someone. And then I discovered that, this is someone who's fully in line with no dig, but they're just trying to get rid of a really, really pervasive weed. And, Charles does recommend to dig out things like couch grass and thistles before you start. But when we're building sites on 8 to 20 plus acres, we can't really stop and dig out everything as we're going.
Yeah.
So like that, I'm open to some of it. Charles is even talking about minimal soil disturbance and saying no dig isn't as black and white as we think it is. But once you've got a good base, like I just suffer with the odd bit of bindweed and thistle in my patch now, and I'm 3 years in, just staying consistent and determined on it. Just they do go away eventually.
Yeah, sure. Will you talk to us a bit about the financial model? So you started with Bath, and now you have 8. is it?
I think we have 8 locations, across the country.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, just before we move on to that, I just talk about the chemicals.
Okay, of course.
Yeah, just because it's so important for me with what I discovered about supermarket produce and what pesticides do to biodiversity. I just thought we can't have allotment sites that allow people to use these. And when you're on a council allotment, if you're growing organically and the person next to you is spraying, then that's definitely coming over to you.
Yeah.
The no chemical rule is no synthetic fertilizers, no pesticides, and it even goes down to organic slug pellets. We can't use organic slug pellets on our sites. So the members are very vigilant, and the community looks after each other. And if everyone is in line with growing this way, then the people who may not be in line with it get found out very quickly.
Yes.
They get a phone call from me, and we have an honest discussion about the implications of the things that they want to do or they have done. And then if they do them again, then I ask them to leave the site, because it's so important.
Yeah.
I had one of my members, I was walking around, I saw blue slug pellets all over their patch. I rang them up, spoke to them about it, and they were trying to justify it, saying it was organic slug pellets. But then I sort of opened up the conversation by saying, well, if a slug eats an organic iron-based slug pellet and then a hedgehog eats that's going to actually cause the hedgehog issues. Then if an owl swoops down and eats that hedgehog, then that's going to cause the owl issues. So they're not really nature friendly. And after you have these conversations with people, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize.
Think about that.
Yeah. And I just keep on coming back to the point. It's like, why are consumers allowed to walk into a garden centre and choose from a shelf full of poisons what they're going to chuck into the natural world? It doesn't make sense. It should be in the hands of farmers only, really, and not everyday people. So that customer, they actually came down and they picked up every single blue organic slug pellet off their patch and they took them away from the site. So
wow.
Yeah, I do find communication does help a lot of these things, and just trying to be as honest with people and friendly and approachable as possible is a big one for me. But yeah, I just thought I'd touch on that.
Absolutely, completely. The pivoting down is just with any site aiming at biodiversity, we have to look at it at all its levels. Absolutely. And bees don't know about boundaries.
No, they don't. And when we're talking about biodiversity as well, when we set up our allotment sites, I made it really clear that I didn't want them to just be allotment sites. Like if we take a 9-acre field, a 20-acre field, and we put patches from corner to corner, that looks like Farmville on Facebook.
Yes.
I've said to the guys, we need to plant native hedgerow. We need to have areas of wildflower. We need to have fruit orchards. We need to plant our own hazel coppice. We need to dig ponds. We need to create insect habitats. Yes, and we need the community to help us to do it. And they'll feel empowered that they're taking part in these sorts of activations. So like this year, we actually set up a 72 square meter tree nursery at our Bath site. And there's an amazing... Oh,
yes, I saw that.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, incredible.
The organisation, More Trees Baines, they go into our native forest in the local area, they collect the seed over winter, they grow it on, and then they've set up a network of community-based nurseries who grow the plants for 2 years, and then they get sent out to rewilding projects. And I just think it's incredible. So from those 2 patches, we're going to grow over 2,000 tree saplings, and it's lush. We've got like a mini WhatsApp group that people talk about taking care of them. People take it in turns to water them, to provide them with shade. And yeah, it's beautiful. Like when we look at how we've built our societies around indoor environments, cars, screens, it's so nice to see people connecting with each other outside and getting to know each other in person and start to heal some of the damages that have been done from the way that we've lived our societies for the last 40, 50 years, and then the strange social damage that COVID did to us all by being locked inside and causing us to not make new connections. Like, I look at the UK and I go, I would love there to be like 300, 400 market gardens surrounding each city and town, and there to be allotments as part of that offering, and go, now we're moving to more of a localized food-based support system and a community-based support system. And you look around towns and cities and you go, it's just so much green fields full of pasture, and we could grow on them. We could do this. Or
worse than pasture, full of cornfields and wheat fields, etc., which are like chemical laboratories, of course.
Yeah. But we've got so the field in our original field was a wheat field. but it had been regeneratively farmed for the last 7 years before we took it on. So
great.
we're starting with a bit of a better place, but there are we look at all of the locations around the UK. We look at the soil. We talk to the farmer about the history of it, and you will be hard pressed to find fields that haven't had stuff sprayed on them nowadays. So now it's about drawing a line in the sand there and going, right, now this field won't have that anymore, and we can let the soil health recover, and we can let the biodiversity above ground recover as well. And like on our larger sites, we're setting up 1 to 2 acre market gardens. In Croydon, we've partnered up with an organisation called the Black Farmers Market. We charge them £1 rent a year. That's like unheard of in trying to get access to a growing space near cities. And then we empower them with advice and knowledge from our network of market gardeners to help them, because I know that there are loads of our members who might be growing on a 36 square metre patch and want to learn the basic skills of growing, but they have ambitions of getting into local food production. They have ambitions of being self-sustaining in the future. And if we can go, this is how you do it on a mini scale, and this is how you do it on a slightly bigger scale, and you can get all of that knowledge from one place, then that's a really, really valuable experience. I've got a member on our original site. He's called Dan. He came to me in the first year. He was like, I've been working in hospitality for so long. I'm sick of it. I want to work the land, but I don't have the confidence and I don't know how to do it. So he spent 2.5 seasons growing with us on our original site. He worked his way up to over 100 square meters. And then he thought, you know what? I feel like I'm confident enough to try and do something bigger.
Yeah.
So now he's running a market garden 2 miles up the road from us. And it's just like
fantastic.
The platform for change that we can create. If we do create more growing spaces and we do get people into the soil and connecting with each other, it's mega. It is absolutely mega. And yeah, it keeps me going every day.
How do the people listening to this tap into it?
Yeah, so we have our website. It has a locations page. If you go on there, you might be able to find one that is closest to you. If it's not on the list, there is a little button underneath to press, and you can fill out a questionnaire. And like once we understand where people want us to come, we'll go there basically. And it's like what I say with our sites that we launch. I go, look, if we sell out all of our memberships and then we have a waiting list of over 350 people, we'll look into launching another site. Like we won't look at keeping a long waiting list and making people wait for years and years, because the reality is every year you miss in the UK is a growing season you're never going to get back again. And if you're going to live till 80 and you start growing at 20, you know, that's 60 growing seasons. If you spend 28 of them on a waiting list, that's only 30 growing seasons left. And that's sad when I start to think about it like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I just, you know, it's such a nice experience. I wish we had a longer growing season.
And that's why you're so passionate and why you want to roll it out, because it's urgent.
Exactly.
It's an urgent thing.
It is so urgent. Just getting people connecting with each other in the land and our food chain. When you think about the damage that has been done, and big companies like Bayer and Monsanto and the game that they're playing, it's important for the people to start taking control again. And I do say to my members, I'm just like, look, let's just use this as inspiration. Go, we saw a problem and we thought, well, we're everyday people, we can try and fix it. Yeah. And if we endlessly fall back on going, oh, government's going to fix it, they're going to do that, then things probably won't change. You know what I mean? Like let's just all band together and fix and create a future that we all want to be part of.
Excellent. So how many subscribers have you got now?
Oh, I think we have nearly 2,000 people growing.
Fantastic.
And this is our 3rd season in existence. So
wow, that's so great. And so they can join up to subscribe. Will you just talk about the money side of it a little bit so our listeners can know what they're in for?
Yeah, of course. So our patches, you can pay monthly or you can pay yearly. Now, if you pay yearly, you get a month for free. If you pay monthly, there is discounts, but it's for people who, for Blue Sirens workers, for military and NHS, and we do PIP, disability, and students. So anyone on housing allowance can also get 25% off with us. And the price starts at $9.99 a month, which is for 12 square meters, which is we call it the mini patch. It is mini. You can grow an interesting amount of food on it, but it's nice to go, oh, I'm going to dip my toe into this. I don't know whether I like it or not. It's usually the patch that I recommend to people if they've never looked after a plant before, and that includes houseplants. And then we've got a starter patch, which is $19.99 a month. That is 36 square meters. And that's the sort of one that I go, if your house is a jungle, you love your house plants, but you've never grown food before, then a starter patch is going to be a good size for you, because I know you've got green fingers already and you're just going to like jump into this and love it. Then we've got a couples patch, so that's for couples who are in love, or a couple of friends or a few friends to share. That's mathematics, 72 square meters. And then you can add on another starter on top of that.
Right.
I think a couple's is £35 a month, and then a group, which is 3 starters, is £45 a month. So the way that I look at it is I go, we offer agricultural events, we offer seeds, we offer tools, we offer plants. We're giving you everything you need to get going. So for this amount of money, you can come and get going. If you did get a council allotment, you'd have to find the tools. You might have to invest in a shed to keep them in. And then just like using the starter patch as an example, which is £20 a month, we run yoga pretty much bi-weekly. So if you wanted to go to a yoga studio as a punter and you do 2 sessions a month, that's probably going to be about £12.50 each session. So that's £25 a month that you're spending on just yoga. But you could come to Roots allotments and you can spend £20 a month. You can grow, you can have community, and you can do yoga.
Yeah, you can do yoga too. Thrown in.
It's brilliant. You know, we do Qigong, we do sound baths, because my philosophy is that if we're increasing our well-being by growing food and being in nature and being surrounded by like-minded people, then if we add a layer of actual well-being activity on it, like yoga, meditation, sound baths, Pilates, Qigong, then that's going to make you feel doubly as good, because you're already coming into it with a good mindset. So it's just, when you look at the UK and you go, there are so many people going through a mental health crisis or a physical health crisis. And if we search back down to the root, a lot of it comes back to food and comes back to connection and comes back to like loneliness. And we go, well, if we can tick those boxes at the same time, then we will be creating happier human beings who will hopefully in turn create a happier, healthy planet and society. And I just feel like we need a mass mobilization of growers in this country.
You're a good prophet for that, I'd say. So, Ed, what's the future? More of them?
More, hopefully more. Yeah. So in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'll be going up to Sheffield and launching our Sheffield location. Our Nottingham location launched a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know where's next, to be honest with you. We've got land agents who help us find the fields, find people interested in them. Like, it's always my preference to partner with farmers who want to diversify. We're partnering with some amazing farmers in Leeds, Jill and Andrew. I think they're like just some of the most amazing people that I've met. And they were saying to me, oh, the most amount of revenue that we've been able to make from this field that you guys are renting is like £3,000-4,000 a year, and you guys are pretty much paying us triple that, and we don't have to do anything to do with it. And it's now helping support them in land work on their farm. And that is just my favorite story, because if we could launch with people like that on all of our sites, it's a really strong proposition, because the whole of the agricultural system is asking farmers to diversify because the subsidies are going away. And,
of course.
And they don't know how they're going to make their money. So, these sort of schemes are really accessible to them. They're really in line with what they should be doing, like farmers' food production. Whether you sow a seed as an individual on an allotment or whether you're sowing it in a big field, we're all part of agriculture. We're all part of food security. And I think it's really important that the Soil Association came out last week and asked for a doubling of production of fruit and vegetables in the UK. I think it's something that we've been speaking about for a long time now, where we uncovered these statistics around importation of food. And apparently it's around 80% of food is imported in this country, if you count the food that is bought from overseas and then prepared in the country into meals.
Yes, exactly. The raw materials. Yeah.
It's mind-boggling, and I just think, oh gosh, what happens if the system does fail, or if the climate affects Spain and Italy and Africa so severely that we can't import our food from there? then where do we end up as a country? So,
and can I just ask you? So, you've said UK. So, are you also spreading to Scotland and Wales as well as?
Do you know what? There's been talk of Edinburgh, and
okay,
it's so far away from here.
Yeah,
I'm like Leeds is quite far. I love Leeds. I was born in Leeds, and all my family are from Yorkshire, but it is so far. It is.
Well, you'll have to get someone up there to be a satellite.
Exactly. I'm probably going to need an area manager to help me out soon. But we originally wanted to focus on the M4 corridor between Bath and London. But as the many layers of the onion that we've peeled back to do with this business, we discovered that we have software that you can click on a field. It tells you the deed to a field, tells you whether it's got planning permission on it, who owns it. And then we usually try and reach out to them through those details to be like, oh, hi, do you want to launch an allotment growing community with us? But I'd say if you look at the cities, like 90% of the Greenbelt has a housing option on it with those prefab homes, Taylor Wimpey, that sort of vibe. And like,
let's have roots allotments instead on some of them.
It'd be lovely, wouldn't it? But the people who own the land, who the housing people have managed to convince, they're in to make millions, and we can only offer them thousands per year. So they politely decline us. And it's really sad because I know Labour are going to relax a lot of the planning laws, and we've sort of had a foresight into this for the last 2 years of what is going to happen to the Greenbelt. And like, I'm sort of coming to this conclusion that the logical policy is to build on brownfield and to grow on Greenbelt, whether that's an allotment or a market garden, and create a shared space for food production and nature. It seems logical, but there are a lot of things in this world which are illogical.
That's so nice to chat, Ed. Thank you. And exciting, Will, Christian and you launching it all. And so Roots Allotments is the website. And can we chat soon in 6 months or so and see where you've got to?
Definitely. Yeah. Hopefully it'll be a really, really exciting chat, and we'll have maybe 1,000 more people growing with us and more availability around the UK. I think as we sort of get into it, you look at the allotment waiting lists in the UK, and they're just the tip of the iceberg for the growing appetite that exists here. We think 3 to 4 million people want to grow in this country, not 260,000. There's a lot of people who are put off by the waiting lists. And
of course,
that skews the data a little bit. So yeah, very excited, and thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange with Ed from Roots Allotments. And what an amazing story that is, and what energy that guy has. Next week, I'm with Josie Lewis, our head gardener at Perch Hill, and I thought it would be really interesting for people to get very much a head gardener's take on which bulbs to plant in the autumn. There's been so much stuff about kind of tulip blight and should we be growing tulips or not, how to grow them, but also how narcissus are perhaps even better than a tulip because of their perenniality and their health. So we're going to debate all these things, and Josie's going to give you her selection of the very best ones that she wouldn't be without in the garden here at Perch. So see you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.